Chris? Sorry, Ethan.
Casualties continue to mount over the long years I've struggled. More and more, I find myself wondering if it's all worth fighting for.
Why?
Yeah, it's worth it.
Chris Redfield is not our hero. Heck, even the title of his last appearance blatantly spells it out for you. And this Chris that we're seeing now, the one that's going around shooting moms and taking babies, is not doing this as part of some undercover Umbrella sting operation.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
No, I'm here to tell you that Chris has always been two-faced. Just look at the cover of the very first game compared to the latest cover. He literally has two faces. Cover one side, and he's terrified. Cover the other, and he's coming. Or is it the other way around? Anyway, this half of the new cover, he's straight up evil. And this goes way beyond just symbolism, inside and outside of the games. As you could see from my intro, the BSAA's poster boy, the All-American Boy Scout, is a jerk. And who could blame him? Just look at all the teams he's been a part of that have met their end of BOWs. Bravo team, 90%, in some cases, 100% dead. Alpha team, 50%, all dead. Delta squad, dead. Alpha team 2, dead. And his BSAA squad from the opening scene of Vendetta, all dead, even the VIP. And events like this just keep happening around Chris. Events that go way beyond bad luck or coincidence. Just look at how many people have conveniently died around Chris.
We could have prevented some of those deaths.
Shut up.
The Redfield body count is high enough to rival that of the Clintons. Forget about this hunk. Chris is the real Mr. Death. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, so get ready for a deep dive into the secret anti-hero that is Chris Redfield. Because for this episode of our research, I'll be covering everything from the canonical games to the canonical non-game works, such as Wesker's report and Jessica's report. And as much as we love to hate them, I'll even be including events from the animated films, so major spoilers ahead. Also, this is my own personal conspiracy theory, so don't expect any mention of Werewolf Chris, Doppelganger Chris, Mind Control Chris, Shapeshifter Chris, or any other ludicrous conspiracy theory.
Stop! Are you with anybody, Jill?
No, but why?
The stars are finished. Someone is a traitor. Umbrella set us up.
Enrico! Traitor? Who?
Now, before we jump right into why Chris is the bad guy, I need to set up some context first, because most of my evidence is circumstantial, but that doesn't make it any less compelling. So I'll be starting this video off with the origins of both Chris and Wesker, following their missions, team-ups, and eventual rivalry.
Wesker. So you've come. Chris, you make me proud. But of course you are one of my men.
And I promise, after this video, you'll never look at Chris Redfield the same again. Part 1. Project Wesker. This project began in the 1960s, created by the founder of Umbrella, Sir Oswald E. Spencer. Spencer, much like every elite throughout history, started abducting children, but not for the same purposes that someone like Joe Biden would abduct them for. Nope, Spencer wanted to create a master race of humans, starting with a group of intelligent people, all who shared his ideals. And he went about this by abducting smart kids from all over the world, even kidnapping the poor ones, because they were just as bright and smart as the white ones.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
And each of these kids were given the last name Wesker. Unaware of their purpose, all these kids were free to do whatever they wanted in life, but the ones on the correct path found their way to Umbrella. By 1999, Phase 2 of the Wesker project had begun. Only 13 of the Wesker children were selected to be infected with an altered strain of the progenitor virus. This strain of the mother virus was injected through various methods. These candidates either received it willingly or unwillingly, contracting it from places like hospitals where they had no idea they were being infected. But in certain cases, like Albert's, he injected it into himself. And because the side effects varied from host to host, only 2 of the Wesker candidates survived, Alex and Albert. Alex developed super scoliosis, while Albert gained super strength, speed, cat eyes, and diabetes.
Damn, she used to be a fine piece of ass. I can straighten that back up for her if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Now before we get to Chris, there's a final detail about the Wesker project that needs to be covered. Every Wesker kid, on top of being raised to create a master race of humans, were also programmed with a desire to seek out and find their mysterious benefactor. That person being Spencer. Now, it's unknown how this programming was implemented. What is known is that Alex was exempt, since Spencer broke his own rules and let her in on the secret project. So as far as we know, Albert is the only known Wesker to meet his maker. Or was he? So, with these 3 phases covered, let's take a look at Chris Redfield and see how he checks off all the boxes to becoming a qualified Wesker. Chris Redfield's origins. After a car wreck mushed their parents, Chris and Claire became orphans, and not long after this tragic event, Chris abandoned his little sister to join the United States Air Force. And during his time served, he was quickly recognized as a skilled pilot and excellent marksman, but for reasons unknown, he was discharged for insubordination. He was just in the Air Force long enough to buddy up to Barry Burton.
Chris is our old partner, you know.
Who landed him his next gig as point man for STAR's Alpha Team.
I'll go and check it out.
All right. Jill and I will stay and secure this area.
Now, I'm not sure when Chris made his connections with Umbrella, but according to this promotional comic that had a limited release alongside the first game, and is widely considered canon, Chris had a lifelong best friend named Billy.
Prisoner Billy Cohen, ex-lieutenant, 26 years old.
Nope, not that Billy, but for visual purposes, let's use him as a stand-in. Anyway, Billy was a researcher for Umbrella, and Umbrella faked his death with a plane crash.
Officially, Lieutenant Billy Cohen is dead.
Yeah, I'm just a zombie now.
But that didn't stop Billy from having late-night phone calls with Chris.
So, you seem to know me. Been fantasizing about me, have you? Oh, I see. You're with stars. Well, no offense, honey, but your kind doesn't seem to want me around, so I'm afraid our little chat time is over.
So now this gives Chris 2 real connections with Umbrella researchers and people who have ties with Umbrella. Albert Wesker, who was captain of STARS, and Billy. And with intel from Billy, Chris could have easily gotten himself kicked out of the Air Force to take up that open position at STARS, getting him closer to Wesker and Chief Irons.
So what happened to Billy?
Well, since he made the mistake of being friends with Chris Redfield, he ended up dying for reals. In the comic, Billy wants to go public on Umbrella, so Chris immediately hops in as Shelby Cobra, reaching speeds of 150 miles an hour.
Damn, sounds like Chris really wanted this guy dead.
Yeah, and where's a police officer coming up with the scratch to buy a ride like this?
Dead parents?
I guess. Anyway, to sum things up, someone slit Billy's throat, but not before Chris encountered some zombies and killed a zombie dog. Now, I know what it's like, having to kill your own dog, and it's not something I just go around telling people, but for Chris to not even mention any of this to anyone on his team, Chris was clearly hiding something. And I think it's safe to say, this checks off 2 of the requirements to becoming a Phase 3 Wesker. Chris is an orphan, working for Umbrella, well, working for STARS, led by Wesker, who's under orders from Umbrella, and Chris is straight up working for them now. He isn't even trying to hide it anymore. Now for the 3rd phase, we have to cover the events of 1998, starting with the Mansion incident. At this time, Chris was on the right path to becoming a qualified candidate for the injection, but Wesker was just further along than him. And at this time, both Chris and Wesker were unaware of Spencer's little experiment, but they were driven by that desire Spencer had instilled within them to make his dream a reality and seek him out.
A new superior breed of humans, given birth by the progenitor virus. The Wesker children were entrusted with endless potential.
Are you saying I was manufactured?
And we all know Wesker's story. Birkin gave him the progenitor strain, and he injected it in himself moments before his death.
It's magnificent.
And I believe it was the false reporting of Wesker's death that led to the initiation of Chris's third phase. With Albert's death, the project's success rate had dropped down to only 18%, with no qualified individuals to replace Wesker, so Alex advised Spencer to start selecting individuals from the pool of failed candidates, Chris Redfield being one of those failures. Phase 3, Chris's mutation. Now I've found evidence to suggest that Chris did in fact receive this shot. Whether it was willingly or unwillingly is anyone's guess though. At this time, it was still 1998 after the mansion incident, and these shots were still being administered in hospitals, and Chris Redfield just so happened to attend one of these hospitals. Raccoon City Hospital to be exact, the very one from Resident Evil 3. You know, the one with the secret lab housing BOWs and vaccine research on the T-Virus, making this the ideal spot for Chris to contract the virus. And how do I know he was here? Because I found his medical records and x-rays while playing through Resident Evil Outbreak. And if his mutation wasn't obvious enough, just look at these before and after photos.
Just look at those muscle gains. You think it did anything for him between his legs?
Yeah, it definitely changed his height and eye color. 5'11" to 6'1", blue eyes to brown eyes. All similar changes Wesker went through. He also gained special powers. Just look at his abilities from RE-verse. Indomitable spirit. The dude can refuse to die whenever he feels like it. And with that, we've checked off the third item on the to-do list to becoming a Wesker, leaving Chris with just that desire to seek out Spencer. Which brings us to Chapter 2, the Sibling Rivalry. And with all that setup out of the way, we now know where Chris is coming from, so let's examine the events of the first game, keeping all this new information in mind. The series begins with Bravo Team's helicopter conveniently malfunctioning near the Spencer estate. Now everyone likes to say this is Wesker's doing, but in the Wesker report, he never mentions it or takes credit for it. But Chris, on the other hand, is a skilled pilot who knows the ins and outs of helicopters and has a reason for wanting to go to the Spencer estate. Also, in the Wesker report, Wesker makes it very clear that Umbrella did not want the stars going anywhere near the mansion or lab.
Initially, Umbrella instructed me secretively to keep stars out of the case. But, with the heightened emotions of the citizens, stars had no choice but to move in.
But I think Wesker seized this opportunity as much as Chris did.
Then at last, opportunity knocked.
Whatever Chris's plan was here, whether it was to obtain information or destroy it is unknown, but what is known is that Chris is obviously hiding something. As you can see here, he plays dumb whenever Rebecca mentions Umbrella.
Somebody sure knows how to get a deal. Most of the medical supplies here are from Umbrella.
Umbrella.
Don't you know? They're only the biggest taxpayers around here. They make most of these medicines right here.
What's Umbrella?
Don't you know? It's a large-scale pharmaceutical company based in Raccoon City.
Oh, I see.
Like those late-night phone calls with Billy meant nothing to him. But Enrico sees through his lies.
Don't come any closer, Chris.
Double-crosser. Enrico, wait.
And remember earlier how Enrico treated Jill in the same situation? He had no problem with Jill, but he knew something was up about Chris. Whatever he knew, though, he took with him to his grave, thanks to Wesker looking out for him.
Double-crosser!
Don't!
Seriously, throughout this entire game, Wesker is always there for Chris.
Chris, this way!
He saves Chris from a dog, leaves Jill's handgun behind for him to find, repairs this door, leaves little notes for Chris along the way, along with supplies, and I have a few theories as to why Wesker plays favorites here. Theory 1. Wesker is under direct or indirect orders to look after Chris. Theory 2. Thanks to Chris's connects with Umbrella, Wesker and Chris have been in cahoots all along. Theory 3. Even though they're not really related, Wesker children have been known to form familial bonds, as observed between Alex and Albert. Also, when given the chance, Jill immediately names Wesker as the traitor.
Chris, Wesker's the...
I know.
But when the roles are reversed, Chris never gives up Wesker's name.
Of course I'm alive. Jill, there's something big going down, and I don't think we're part of the equation.
Chris, you make me proud.
And like brothers, Chris and Wesker are competitive, even though they share a similar goal here, and that goal is to find information on Spencer, and this estate was the best place to obtain it. Or so they thought, because this lab housed an AI that contained the entire summation of Umbrella, UMF-013. Unfortunately for the Weskers, they arrived a little too late. Sergei had already stolen it, along with the far superior T-011 Tyrant. Had the AI remained, along with the superior Tyrant, maybe this incident would have played out differently, but with the information lost, Wesker no longer needed Chris, or maybe he just wanted to defy Spencer. Either way, he released the Tyrant that was available to him.
Time for show and tell.
Now in this context, this scene isn't as hilariously awful anymore.
The ultimate life form. Tyrant.
Chris? Stop it.
Never mind. Who am I kidding? It's cringe. But given this context, I believe Chris is actually mocking Wesker's life's work here, as if he can tell it's a failure.
Wesker, you're pitiful. This is your savior?
And I think he's a little bit relieved, because all this time, up to this point, Chris was driven by his curiosity, believing Wesker was on the verge of something great, and he wanted to see what Spencer's best protege had to offer. And it was a joke. Chris does more damage to Wesker with this line than he ever did with a weapon.
You say this failure is your savior?
You could make sure yourself whether Tyrant is a failure or not.
He forced Wesker's hand and revealed that Spencer's project was no step closer to achieving that New World Order, and this Tyrant was premature.
What? Premature?
Hey now, I think we've all been there before.
And what happened next, I believe, was an honest mistake. Wesker died.
I died once. I will never forget the cold, dark fingers of death reaching out for me.
Only to be reborn, like a phoenix from the ashes. An ability I believe Chris has too, but he hasn't cashed it in yet.
I had risen beyond the human race and cheated death itself.
So Chris defeats Tyrant and sends Rebecca to set the self-destruct all by herself, not because he cares about containing the virus, but because he wants to bury the evidence, and maybe, if he's lucky, Rebecca would accidentally get herself killed in the process.
Chris wanted her dead. Why didn't you just shoot her?
Might need the bullets.
So, following the destruction of the mansion, Spencer has Chris's Wesker status reinstated and finally gives him that progenitor strain, causing Chris to become increasingly agitated. As reported by Jill Valentine.
Chris, we need to stay calm.
She witnesses Chris assault a fellow officer, Elran, from the little boy's unit, over some spilt coffee. Don't believe me? Just look in Jill's diary. And after Jill saves Elran from Chris's new boulder-punching strength, Chris just winks at her and walks away. This event alone is enough to convince me that Chris is evil now. He sounds just like Bully Maguire.
Gonna cry?
And immediately after this event, Chris skips town without telling any of his friends or family of his whereabouts, putting his sister's life in danger, not once, but twice. In fact, The only people who had direct contact with Chris during this time was Umbrella. But before we get into Code Veronica, I want to point out that Jill found one of Chris's hideouts covered in bloodstains with the STARS knife stabbed in the floor. I believe this was a message left for Wesker, and I'll get into that a little later. Now for the events of Code Veronica. The game opens up with no real context or setup as to why Claire is storming an Umbrella facility in Paris, like some goddamn one-man-woman army. She's doing this though because she was set up, fed false intel by Chris, who used her as bait in order to find Umbrella's secret Nazi camp, because it was almost time for Alexia's quinceañera. Just look at Chris's epilogue from Resident Evil Nemesis to see what Chris was up to during Claire's arrest. He starts off by saying, "Forgive me, Claire." At least he's feeling some guilt for setting her up, and just as he receives word that Umbrella's taken the bait, he removes his standard issue Wesker shades to check out a girl who looks just like his sister. And you guys thought the Ashfords were creepy? And what happens next is something that has always bothered me. Just how exactly did Chris know which cliff face would lead him to the secret entrance? Why was he climbing without gear? And what was in that satchel that he lost? All questions I believe I can finally answer thanks to this Chris Wesker theory. You see, Chris was already well on his way to Rockford Island long before Leon ever got a hold of him. Chris knew exactly where to go, where to climb, thanks to the GPS tracker he had placed on Claire. That's right, before Chris abandoned Claire, he gave her his lighter, a lighter fitted with a tracking beacon.
Have you seen anyone named Claire Redfield?
Did you just say Claire?
You know who she is, don't you?
Don't worry about her. I helped her escape.
Keep it. It was a gift from my brother, but...
Thanks.
I guess my sister owes you. Thanks for helping her.
Everyone's gone.
Unfortunately, he lost the tracking receiver along with his other supplies, and as for climbing without gear, after the progenitor shot, he was superhuman now. A fall from this height would just be a minor inconvenience to him. So Chris makes it to the top, right where the tracker told him the lighter would be. And as you begin to catch on, you'll notice Chris only ever does the right thing as long as it serves him. In this case, he only saves Rodrigo to get his expensive lighter back. With Chris now inside the facility, he discovers that Wesker's here, along with his BOW snatching organization, Host Capture Force, a business model Chris would later go on to adopt and perfect with the formation of his Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance. And it's here, at this confrontation, where Wesker realizes Chris is now a Phase 3 Wesker, because no average man could survive a chokehold grip toss like that with only their neck to break their fall. Best case scenario, Chris would have been paralyzed. And with this even playing field, the sibling rivalry really takes off. But as usual, Wesker is always one step ahead of Chris, stealing the BOWs and forcing Chris to do all the hard labor.
Chris, since you're one of my best men, I'll let you handle this.
Chris really is one of Wesker's best men. Chris finishes off the Ashfords, destroys the base and all the research, eliminating Spencer's rivals and protecting his future utopia. Wesker then steals Steve's body for the virus within him, saving Chris from an awkward conversation about who's sitting on whose lap in the jet. But as thanks for handing over Steve, Wesker returns Chris's STARS knife, the same one from the apartment, signaling that the game has just begun. So, fast forward to 2003. 5 years later, Chris has formed his own Bioweapon Recovery team under the guise of anti-bioweapon activism, forming the BSAA, an NGO with no real authority or jurisdiction yet. But thanks to an anonymous tip from Wesker, for reals, Wesker called in Chris's anti-bioterrorism team to storm the Umbrella Caucus lab in Russia, which provided the perfect cover for Wesker to slip in undetected. Even though he was immediately detected.
He's like a little black cockroach.
Anyway, it's here at this lab where Chris and Wesker have finally located UMF-013, but just like before, they come out empty-handed. UMF-013 did not contain the information on Spencer they were looking for. So Wesker and Chris did the next best thing they could think of. They put the squeeze on Spencer. With help from Chris, Wesker testified anonymously against Umbrella, and paired with the evidence they gathered from UMF 013, it was enough to bring down Umbrella and seize Spencer's assets, which whittled his staff down to just a handful of guards and his personal butler. And with this victory, the BSAA began to expand, taking part in the infamous Terra Grigia panic, where they were unable to intervene thanks to restrictions imposed by the Federal Bioterrorism Commission.
In 2004, Veltro, a terrorist group opposing the city's development, launched a bioterrorist attack. They not only released a virus, but also several creatures, known as bioorganic weapons, further complicating the situation. This launched one of the worst tragedies the world has ever seen.
Now I know what you're all thinking. What does any of this have to do with Chris Redfield being evil? How is the formation of the BSAA evil? And the answer is simple. The BSAA is just as evil as any other organization that thrives off terror and catastrophe. Organizations like this need fear and events just like the Terra Grigia panic to grow and receive more funding. And if the BSAA were real, they'd be the worst of the worst, going beyond just sitting idly by while people suffer.
And who are you supposed to trust? Politicians who sell their souls for a few votes? CEOs who betray consumers for a quick buck? Count on us instead. We're above the politics, always watching, always ready to face the threat head on. We are the unflinching mop that sops up the evils of bioterrorism and chemical warfare.
So, because Chris needed power, he needed his NGO to be officially sanctioned by the United Nations. And in order to achieve this, he needed to distance the BSAA from the FBC. So he conspired with Tricell spies that had infiltrated the FBC, one of which was hired by Excella Gioni herself, Excella who worked directly with Albert Wesker. These two spies were Jessica Sharawat and Raymond Vester. Together, they devised a plan that would get the FBC to expose themselves as the real terrorists. This false flag terror operation was led by Clive R. O'Brien, and this operation was carried out at the expense of their own people, friends, and colleagues. A sacrifice Chris was willing to make, and it wouldn't be the first time. Overall, the plan was successful. Morgan Lansdale of the FBC was arrested, and the BSAA was officially sanctioned, giving Chris the authority and resources necessary to track down Spencer.
Almost too easy, wasn't it? The company let them take Morgan out with the trash.
Tough world.
The BSAA isn't as useless as I thought. Things could really heat up.
Indeed. The fun's just getting started.
But there was just one more problem. Jill. Jill was still alive, and I don't know why. Maybe because she's seen too much. But Chris is constantly trying to get her killed. He sends her off to fight hunters alone. He abandons her in Raccoon with the Nemesis. In Revelations, he withholds information that ends up putting Jill and Parker's lives in danger.
I sent Jill and Parker to the Mediterranean on faulty intel, but now I've lost contact with them. I haven't heard from them since.
Sending them on a wild goose chase in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. And thanks to a decoy Chris, Jill is gassed and stripped of her weapons, and then she's targeted by a satellite laser, and when it's all said and done, he makes Jill do all the work again. He forces her to swim in T-Abyss-infected waters, and Chris doesn't even help to carry Parker to safety. Wow, seriously, Chris? And after all that, especially with the T-Abyss inoculation, the BSAA was required to run tests on Jill, and this is when they discovered Jill's rare condition. Jill had been infected with the T-Virus all along, ever since she contracted it from Nemesis back in '98. But thanks to a vaccine, she was able to bond with the T-Virus, a mutation that made her more resilient to other viruses. And word of this discovery quickly got back to Wesker, thanks to his moles in the BSAA, which Chris had hired. And it was around this time, after everything they've been through, after all the searching and fighting, Spencer decided to finally call it quits. Seriously, for reasons unknown, he just had his butler call up Albert and was like, "Yo, I'm hiding in this castle in Europe." So, in classic Wesker double-cross fashion, he called up the BSAA and tipped them off to Spencer's location, and a deal was made in secret. Wesker would hand over Spencer in exchange for Jill Valentine. Unbeknownst to Jill, she followed Chris into the estate. Now, I don't know exactly what happened next, if this was just a classic Wesker triple cross, or if this was just Wesker losing his cool, but either way, he didn't hold up his end of the deal. He robs Chris of that meeting with Spencer, and Spencer of his dreams of immortality, by punching right through the geezer, in a similar fashion that his own creation had once punched through him.
The right to be a god. That right is now mine. The right to be a god.
And with this event playing out right before Chris's eyes, it signified the end of the Wesker project and the beginning of Project Redfield. Chris Redfield was the failsafe project that none of the other Weskers knew about. Upon witnessing the murder of his benefactor, Chris immediately went into contingency mode. Spencer had put his faith in the wrong Wesker child, but Chris was going to do everything within his powers to protect Spencer's legacy, and that meant eliminating the corrupt and unworthy Weskers. So, the Wesker brothers duke it out, for realsies this time. Wesker may be faster, but Chris has that super strength and that indomitable spirit, which explains why Wesker can't just punch through him. But as usual, Wesker gets what he wants, and Chris is left empty-handed again. Which brings us to the events of Resident Evil 5. The year is 2009. As for the reasons he wished to participate in the mission, Chris would not comment. Whether he is withholding information or not is unclear. BSAA document on Chris's involvement in Africa. It had been 3 years since Wesker had run off with Jill, and after hearing rumors of a new doomsday device and potential Jill sightings, Chris finally had a lead.
What do you know about Ouroboros?
Robo?
No. Did Natalia go to the same school of playing dumb that Chris did? It must be a Wesker thing.
Oh, I see.
But before he could get started, he had to get his whole team slaughtered, for old time's sake. And with this tradition out of the way, he is free to explore these old African labs without question or suspicion. You'll see Chris is very familiar here, either with this specific installation or ones just like it. He knows how to operate every terminal, as if he has his own username and password. He also knows what's waiting just around the corner.
Wait.
Seriously, there's no other way to explain this scene, other than he's been here before.
Umbrella.
He also knows exactly where to look for Jill, and where she should be stored. And along the way, he discovers that Jill was abducted for her blood. Wesker was finally able to perfect that virus he'd been working on all these years, to execute his own version of Spencer's utopia. And this improved virus was called Ouroboros, and much like Wesker's Tyrant from the first game, I'd say it's a major embarrassment. Chris once again mops the floor with Wesker's life's work. If Wesker honestly thought the virus was perfect, and that he was a suitable candidate to bring about the next stage of evolution, don't you think he would have taken the virus himself, before letting Chris destroy everything? My only guess is that Chris's sudden appearance caused him to rush things, because this cannot be what Wesker had envisioned a god to look like. Just look at him. No way this is what Spencer wanted. And this all comes to a head in this volcano, where we really get to see Project Redfield's power shine for the first time. Instead of running from boulders, Chris finally conquers them by punching them straight into hot lava. Talk about a character arc. Next up, he mounts Wesker's infected wiggly sausage back. Chris starts gaping that rectum around Wesker's heart like it's no big deal. If anyone else attempted this, this would happen to them. This action alone leads me to believe that Chris is actually the chosen one, worthy of being Wesker's so-called god. Chris bonded with the progenitor strain like no other candidate. Also, as far as we know, Chris doesn't require constant injections of insulin to maintain his abilities.
Do it now! Give him the shot!
Also, on an unrelated note, how come these viruses never affect the host's dick? You'd think that a wiggly worm monster would make use of the wiggliest appendage on the human body.
Wiggle, 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 wiggle.
And with the deaths of the remaining Wesker children at the hands of the Redfields, Chris's mission was far from over. Wesker's operatives and failed Weskers were still out there, ones who could potentially disrupt or misinterpret Spencer's will.
Now you can call me Alex.
And to wrap up this chapter of Project Redfield, I just want to point out Chris Redfield's brave bomber jacket from the PC port of the original Resident Evil. It is the only Redfield jacket that is not a Queen reference, and on it you will notice there are 13 little bombs under one big bomb. 13 representing the number of selected Wesker kids, and the one big bomb representing Project Redfield. Part 3, Chris Redfield. Chris takes on a new assignment under the cover of combating BOWs in conflict zones in East Adonia. The year is 2012. His real mission here, though, is to find the one with the same blood as Albert Wesker, and along the way, his squad encounters a woman who he believes is Ada Wong, one of Wesker's former operatives. But for anyone who's played this game, you'll know this is not Ada Wong. This is Ada Wang, Ada's doppelganger, who was created by Derek Simmons, a top figure in the Illuminati and national security advisor to the president.
Looks just like me. No wonder Leon is confused.
Simmons created Ada Wang because the real Ada dumped him and he still wanted to have sex with her. But Wang ends up betraying the BSAA, resulting in all of Chris's men dying. Again. And from this, Chris gets amnesia, but he remembers just enough about himself to know he needs to avoid any tests that the hospitals may run on him, because these tests would reveal the progenitor strain inside him. And this is all true, by the way. The game says he took off before the hospital could see him. He disappeared for 6 months. No idea what he was doing for those 6 months. It's not unlike Chris to abandon his friends and family, so I'm sure Claire wasn't the least bit worried. Just look at her phone call with Piers right after they find him. She doesn't even care he's been missing for 6 months.
So he's in China now?
However, at this time, we're unable to find
all right.
connections to the wide-scale terror
Yeah, well, tell Piers to look after him.
As well as the tragedy that befell the city of Tall Oaks earlier this week.
Maybe she knows something, like this is all going according to plan, and Chris is getting ready to turn all these Chinese people into zombies, which means a bigger paycheck for the Redfields to buy more gifts. And on a side note, I just realized this. If Claire is in on this, she has a thing for abducting children, just like Spencer did. But back to Chris. Until Piers Nivens and the BSAA found him, Chris lived as a moody and violent drunk.
Another round. Fill her up.
You've had enough.
Listen, sweetheart. You're here to pour drinks and look pretty. So how about you shut mouth?
How about you get the hell out of my bar?
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the real Chris Redfield.
Nowhere to go.
Behind the facade is an arrogant asshole, only acting this way because he's alone. And the true test of a man's character is what he does when he believes no one is watching. So after they catch him, Chris's memory begins to come back little by little. He goes along with the BSAA, probably in hopes to get more of his men killed. And whoops, what do you know? Chris's blind hatred and programming from Spencer get all his men killed again. With poor leadership skills and constantly losing his cool. Is this what he was like when the Air Force kicked him out?
Do you even care about our mission anymore?
Shut up!
I feel sorry for all the men that died believing in you. What happened to the legendary Chris Redfield, huh? What happened to you?
And then he finally gets to kill Ada, or so he thinks, but only after she initiated the launch to kill everyone in China. And knowing Chris, he is okay with this. That is, until he remembered that Leon is in the strike zone, and this missile could ruin any chance of him making babies with Claire.
I'm sorry to interrupt your vacation, but we really need to talk. Do you really need to fuck Chris's sister, Claire?
Leon! Leon, where are you?
Chris, we're just outside of Tachi. Why?
Get the hell out of there!
But if he didn't stop the real threat to the world, there would be no more Redfield bloodline to carry on. So he lets everyone in China die to save the world from the C-Virus that threatens Spencer's vision and his own bloodline.
This is the key to stopping the C-Virus. It's...
Jake. What does the C stand for? Coronavirus? Anyway, so he's now being forced to save Jake Wesker, Wesker's son. Everyone believes Jake is the world's only hope to finding a cure, but they're wrong. Chris's antibodies also hold the cure. He just doesn't want anyone knowing this, so he saves Jake and saves the world. Chris can save the world time and time again, but he can never save his own teammates. Later, peers.
Gifts from the BSAA. They said that's the best they can do for us for now.
And later, in Resident Evil Vendetta, Leon and Chris wreak havoc on New York, getting all their men killed, killing pedestrians, causing like 3 9/11s, and refusing to wear gear that would protect them from infections.
You should be wearing a clean suit, or at least a mask.
Yeah, well. How you doing?
And after this, Chris leaves the BSAA. I'm not sure why. But Chris finally embraces who he is and goes full Umbrella, abducting BOWs for Blue Umbrella like Ethan and Mia, and possibly looking for new ways to perfect the virus and finally achieve Spencer's New World Order. Or maybe he plans to resurrect Spencer, which is no longer impossible at this point in the series. We've learned people can be copied, cloned, their consciousness can be digitized and inserted into young minds. Maybe we'll see the return of Alex in Natalia's body, and she will resurrect Wesker and put his consciousness into Jake's body. My other theory is that Chris is secretly Hunk. I mean, we've never seen the two in the same room, which would explain why Hunk is always the lone survivor too, and Lady Hunk could be Claire. But for my final theory, I think that Chris is just an asshole looking out for himself, and this has all been one big misunderstanding.
You think you'll get away with this?
I already have, Jill.
So, my predictions for Resident Evil 8, Chris will die early, but thanks to his abilities, he'll probably be back before the credits roll. And that's it for my Crispiracy video. What are your predictions for Resident Evil 8 and the future of the series? Leave a comment, let me know if I left anything out, and if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon if you really want to support the channel. I'll be providing extra Resident Evil content over there. I'll be sharing my Resident Evil art and commentary, and once a month, I'll be uploading unique Resident Evil AMVs. So check it out. It's cheap and for a good cause. Thanks for watching. Now check out these other Mr. T-Virus videos.